Hello everyone, this is part 5 of What If Naruto Had to Prove Himself, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Partially, Naruto was annoyed because Choji had just cost him a perfectly good opportunity to spend time with Hinata. Partially, he was annoyed because his stomach was rumbling to shame the storm clouds in the land of lightning. Whatever else may be irking him, Naruto was fully annoyed that his hefty friend had led him on a winding path through the village for 30 minutes without saying a word. Finally he broke the silence with a frustrated sigh. "Come on Choji, let's get this over with," he said impatiently. "What's your test and what's the catch?" Choji glanced over his shoulder at the other boy with a smirk that said he was expecting the question. "Do you know what I do in my spare time, Naruto?" he asked, completely ignoring it. Naruto returned the glance with a frown. Where did that come from? Trying to conceal his bafflement, he arched an eyebrow and kept his face impassive. "Eat," he said bluntly. The hefty ninja threw him a cool look. "Other than that," he said patiently. The tall blonde stared at his friend thoughtfully for a moment. "I'd say sleep, but I don't think that's what you're looking for." Choji smiled and gestured to his right. "I come here." Naruto suddenly realized they had come to a stop at what must have been the destination. Glancing to his left, he saw an average-looking building just about the right size for a small shop. The place was in good repair, but was obviously well used. The simple wooden door was worn smooth and adorned with countless scuff marks, a few of the tiles on the roof were beginning to drift loose, and everywhere faded paint was beginning to peel. Words that were probably the name of the place were printed above the door, but they too had long since faded beyond recognition. "What is this place?" he asked, his interest overcoming his irritation. "It's a help center." Naruto glanced back at his friend and saw the other boy beholding the humble building with a sort of proud affection, which only served to heighten his curiosity. "Help center?" he prompted. Choji turned back to him and nodded. "People throughout the village come here to post the details of any needs they have, and the volunteers who work here like me help them out." "What kind of needs?" he shrugged. "Whatever they need help with, really. Anyone can post any sort of request here, but it's usually civilians needing an extra hand with day-to-day stuff, painting a fence, help in the garden, building a shed, random errands, that sort of thing." His blonde friend's eyebrows rose. "That sounds like those beginner missions we got as genin. Discover more. Books, writing software, mobile app advertising, content writing services, ebook publishing, author website builders, fan fiction books, fan art commissions, creative writing workshops, literary magazine subscriptions." Choji nodded. "Yeah, I heard that several of those actually came from this place. For the most part, though, our shinobi have to be devoted to missions that actually earn money, so it's almost all villagers on the volunteer end, too. I'm basically the only ninja who comes consistently." He clapped a hand on the other boy's shoulder and smiled. "Today, there will be 2 of us." Naruto frowned. Meaning my trial for you is to work for the Leaf Village Volunteer Help Center for 1 day. For the next 24 hours, you are a volunteer." Naruto's frown deepened into a suspicious scowl, and he gave his hefty friend a close look. "That's it?" he asked pointedly. It seemed simple enough, and even something he would enjoy. It might be a bit boring, but he could definitely get behind the idea of helping the village like this. The problem was just that it sounded too easy. But Choji just nodded agreeably. "That's it." Naruto streaked USD at him silently for a moment. Then he perked up. "All right," he said cheerfully. "I'll just go grab some breakfast and we can get started." He spun on his heel and took 1 step. "Hold it, Naruto." His shoulders slumped and his head sagged forward. "I knew it." His stomach groaned, and he heaved an exasperated sigh in sympathy before turning back to the other boy. "The catch?" he asked, expecting the worst. Choji merely looked amused at the other boy's dramatic display. "You asked what my test was, endurance. Along those lines, you are not allowed to sleep 1 minute or eat so much as a crumb until your service is over." Naruto's jaw dropped in horror. What? Why? Choji's face hardened and he gave Naruto a serious look. As Hokage, you will go through stressful times, occasions when you will be pressed beyond the norm. There may come times when you have to go a week without sleep, 2 without a decent meal. I even heard the third once went an entire month without either. Whether that's true or not, the Hokage has to put everyone's health and well-being above his own without complaint. Could you do that, Naruto? Prove to me that you can endure the S. His friend's words struck Naruto to the core, and he felt a calm resolve firmly take hold. His stomach forgotten, he nodded solemnly. When do we start? Choji nodded toward the help center. As soon as you step through that door. Without another word, Naruto turned and approached the building. As he reached for the door, however, Choji spoke again. Naruto, there's one more thing. The tall blonde glanced back at him and was surprised to see a look of sympathy. Apology. Whatever it was, he hesitated a moment before continuing. Most of the people who make use this place are from the older generations. Folks our age tend to be more on the volunteer end of things. He fell silent. So? Naruto asked warily. Choji grimaced. So almost everyone you meet today will know about you and it. Many will have painful memories of that day. Naruto's hand went to his stomach and he found his tea suddenly dry. Like turning a coin to see the other face, he suddenly saw the other reason this day would be a real test of endurance. Naruto's heart was still beating in anticipation when they arrived at their first job, at a good-sized farmhouse on the fringe of the village. Choji knocked on the door and called out a greeting. Naruto took a deep breath to steel himself. The tall, slender man who answered the knock had the calluses and tighten of a farmer. The sandy brown hair on his head went untamed, but the fuzz on his chin was neatly shaved. He wore simple clothes and an easy smile that grew into a jolly grin when he saw his visitors. Choji, he laughed. It's good to see you again. How's the ninja business going? Discover more. Books. World building resources. Book. Online storytelling platform. Author website builders. Ebook publishing. Fanfiction writing contests. Creative writing workshops. Genre-specific merchandise. Literary magazine subscriptions. The hefty boy smiled back at him. Always a pleasure, Irido. It's been kinda slow recently. We actually have time to K for a change. The man Irido nodded sympathetically before turning to Naruto. A spark of recognition lit in his eyes, but it vanished into the cheer in his face. And who's your friend here? He laughed. Naruto, caught off guard by this man's friendly demeanor, took a moment to respond. He gave a sudden start at the question and began a hasty bow of respect. I'm Naruto. Uzumaki, right. My name is Irido Ishino. Glad to finally meet you. Naruto's eyes shot back up to find the man wearing a warm, earnest smile, and he was stunned for it. Glad to meet me. He barely had time to register that Irido had seized his right hand in his own and was shaking it firmly before the farmer had released him and glanced back and forth between the two of them. So, what can I do for you boys? Choji laughed. The question is what we can do for you, Irido. You posted a request for a couple of field hands, didn't you? Oh, yes, that we did, and we're just about to get started, too. Come on in, the farmer said loudly, and glancing at Naruto, he added cheerfully, I'll introduce you to everyone. With that he turned and vanished into the house. Choji followed without hesitation and Naruto hurried to catch up. He heard Irido calling out that their hands from the center had arrived, and for everyone to come say hello. That instigated a veritable flood of more brothers, sisters, in-laws, and children than Naruto could ever hope to remember. Many of the men strongly resembled Irido, and all the relatives seemed to share his sentiment. Backslaps and kind greetings all marked by good cheer abounded for the both of them amidst a maelstrom of laughter and high-spirited conversation. Naruto, never having spent much time around large families, was beginning to feel a bit overwhelmed, and he wondered how Choji seemed to be taking it in stride as he did. 2. Everyone here seemed to know who he was, and yet there was no hint of resentment or hostility to be found. It was a strange deviation from the norm for Naruto, and the change only served to disorient him further. Suddenly Naruto found himself face to face with a young boy not quite into his teenage years, introduced to him as Zano Ishino, Irido's own son. The boy looked at him with the sort of starry-eyed admiration he'd only ever remembered receiving from Konohamaru. You're Naruto Uzumaki. You trained under one of the legendary Sannin. You rose from Genin to Jonin in just 1 month. You beat Akatsuki single-handed. He spoke all in a blurting gush, and the wonder in his voice made Naruto almost want to blush. Choji's only partially stifled laughter didn't help. Well, I don't know about single-handed, he began, scratching the back of his head abashedly, but yeah, I guess I did those things. Oh man, you gotta tell me about. Calm down, Zano, a new voice called out. It had a slight rasp to it, and it was quieter than any so far, but all conversation in the room, all sound, in fact ceased upon hearing it. Two of Irido's brothers parted to let another man pass between them. Many long years of experience showed on his face and in his eyes to match the gray creeping into his hair, but one could not quite call him old for one thing, he stood perfectly erect, proudly and firmly. 2. The half-shirt he wore clearly displayed the healthy tighten and defined muscles of his left arm and flank. Though he was a head shorter than most of the men in the room, he seemed to dwarf everyone present, and the evident reverence in which the family held him confirmed for Naruto that this was indeed a great man. You will have plenty of time to hear young Uzumaki's stories as we work. Right now, I would like a chance to meet him, if I may. He walked slowly, with defined steps, to stand directly in front of the blonde boy. Off to the side, Irido smiled proudly and declared, Naruto, meet my father, Suyoken Ishino. Suyoken stood there silently a moment, sizing the boy up with eyes that seemed to see more than simple F and bone. Naruto, at a loss for anything to say, began to bow with the respect the man was obviously due, but a clucking noise made him look back up. No, 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 that is much too formal for a simple farmer like me, Suyoken admonished lightly, almost jokingly. Then his wizened face lit up with a warm smile. It is a pleasure to meet you, young Naruto. It's true what I've heard, you resemble your father so much. He extended a hand for a shake. Naruto, stunned by the magnitude of the comment, gave a start and moved to accept it only to realize that Suyoken had offered his left hand. He murmured a quick apology and switched. As they shook, he glanced at the man's right side and hitched. The arm was hidden by a bulky sleeve, but Naruto's trained ninja eye could see that it hung limply. The barely visible fingertips were completely swathed in medical tape, and it was easy to imagine that the gauze extended up the entire arm. Something about the injury gave Naruto a cold feeling in the pit of his stomach, but before he could ask about it, Suyoken raised his voice and looked around. Okay, everyone. These boys almost certainly have a busy day ahead of them. We mustn't keep them any longer than we have to. Let's get started, shall we? In the riot of cheers and motion that followed, Naruto found himself caught up in a stampede eagerly pulled along, he saw, by young Zano. He glanced to his right and met Choji's eyes. His hefty friend, likewise ensnared in the bustle, gave him a knowing smile and shrugged. Still a bit breathless from the entire situation, Naruto just chuckled and shook his head. Whatever else might follow, the start of this day was certainly proving to be interesting, to say the least. The next couple of hours seemed to pass in a blur. There was a lot of field to tend, but then, there were a lot of Ishinos as well. The process would have gone even faster if Naruto had created some shadow clones, but he wanted to save his energy for the rest of the day. At least, that's what he told himself. In reality, he didn't want the job to pass any quicker. The Ishino family was just as jovial and outgoing in work as it was in greeting. They told jokes and teased each other good-naturedly. They gave slaps on the back for good work and cheerfully pitched in wherever help was needed. In all of this, they included Naruto and Choji without thought. The children were constantly pressing the two of them for stories of their adventures. Zano was particularly eager to hear Naruto's exploits, while the older family members tended to ask more about their lives apart from missions and training. Every Ishino within earshot listened to each tale with equal zeal, and they spun their own stories in return. For once in his life, Naruto began to feel entirely normal. Even so, there remained one tiny detail, always at the peshari, a little nagging thought he couldn't bring himself to ignore. A dim roar of laughter arose on the wind coming from the Ishino fields. Someone must have told one heck of a joke, thought Shikamaru with a smirk. The lazy ninja had been observing the collective efforts for a while now, lounging on the branch of a tree a fair ways away. His friends seemed to be having such a good time that he almost went over to join them. He didn't for two reasons. First, it would be work manual labor, which in itself was too much of a drag. Second, it would mean confronting the reason he had climbed this tree in the first place. Ino glared up at him, exasperated, from the base of the trunk. Look, all I'm saying is that he's been working really hard. At the rate he's going, he'll be more than half done in no time. I just think he deserves a little celebration, don't you? Shikamaru glanced down at her and raised an eyebrow skeptically. Yeah, right, you just want an excuse to throw a party. His blonde teammate began to protest indignantly, but before she could speak he cut her off with a hand gesture. Regardless of your motives, what I want to know is what any of this has got to do with me. She put on an overly innocent look. Well, she began sweetly, obviously this is going to take a lot of effort to put together, and I just don't know if I can do it all myself. I knew it. No, not a chance in the world, Ino. Planning a party with Ino. It'd be easier to batter his own brains out right now and save himself the tears for his sanity later. He turned back to watch Choji entertain a few kids in a spare moment. He recognized the story from the hand motions and chuckled. After a short moment of silence, Ino heaved a big sigh and said, "Oh, well," that instantly got his full attention. She was giving up way too easily. She stared wistfully off into the sky, looking as sad and forlorn as she could. Shikamaru Street USD her suspiciously. It's too bad. Little Saru already agreed to help me, and he was so looking forward to spending time with Uncle Shika. With this her eyes slid back toward him mischievously. The lazy ninja's own eyes narrowed. Ooh. Low blow, Ino. If you think for 1 second that bringing the kid into this is going to change my mind. He really is starting to look like sensei, isn't he? Shikamaru's jaw slammed shut and he glowered at her. It was an absurd idea, he knew it was, that a little boy barely out of his toddler years could resemble a bearded, cigarette-smoking, trench-knife-wielding, battle-hardened warrior ninja. Yet there was something, some spark in the kid's face or behavior, that always reminded Shikamaru of the boy's late father. He grimaced at the picture of Saru Yuhi that surfaced in his mind. What a drag. With a defeated sigh, the lazy ninja slid off the branch and landed next to the blonde girl. All right Ino, you win. She smirked at him triumphantly. I swear, no matter how much you try to hide it you're just such a softie, Shikamaru. His eyebrow twitched irritably. And you're an annoying, troublesome woman, you know that. She laughed, stepped forward and gave him a quick kiss. Love you anyway, she said teasingly. With an amazing display of mental reserve and willpower, Shikamaru managed to keep his cheeks from reddening mostly. All right, if we're gonna do this, we need to get started, he said, setting off briskly to cover the slight lapse. Ino quickly caught up and threaded her fingers through his. He decided he didn't quite mind losing this round. Naruto finally managed to build up his nerve, he had to know. Zano, he began. The boy looked up eagerly. Naruto glanced over to where Suyoken was repairing a patch of soil from an uprooted stump, masterfully using only his left arm. The older farmer had been there working just as hard as the rest of his family. He had remained quiet, for the most part, only occasionally adding details to his son's stories, though he smiled and chuckled right along with the rest of them. Naruto hesitated before continuing. Your grandfather, what happened to his arm? Zano paled and looked uncomfortable, drawing Naruto's attention instantly. The boy turned awkwardly back to the tools he was packing away and didn't speak for a long moment. Naruto glanced over at Choji, but the hefty ninja consciously avoided his look and moved away. He frowned at this, but just as he was about to press the question, Zano said quietly, "It's burned. Very badly burned." The cold feeling returned to Naruto's stomach, but he thrust it aside and pressed on. Why didn't he go to the village hospital? Surely the medics could. I'm sure they could, under normal circumstances, said Suyoken, startling them both in the distraction. Neither had heard him approach. Naruto spun toward him and winced. The gentle farmer had let his sleeve slip off his shoulder, displaying the extent of his wound. The bandages did indeed span his entire arm, as well as a good portion of his right flank. But I'm afraid it was no natural fire that gave me this. Naruto's mouth was dry as he stared at the withered arm. Muscle atrophy made it clear this was no recent injury. What happened? He asked hoarsely, afraid he already knew the answer. The corners of Suyoken's eyes were tight, but he spoke without hesitation or regret. I took this burn while protecting my family from catastrophe a little over 19 years ago. Naruto's head slumped forward, his eyes going sadly to his stomach. I'm sorry, he whispered. For what? He was surprised to feel the older man's good hand clap firmly on his shoulder. He looked up to see Suyoken regarding him with compassion. Did you attack the Leaf Village? Did you burn my shoulder? Well, no, Naruto said with uncertainty. Then what do you have to be sorry for? Suyoken smiled. I have never regretted losing the use of this arm, because that was the price for my son's life. Zano beamed at his grandfather but remained silent. But that's just it, Naruto protested. If this thing inside of me hadn't been there. The hand on his shoulder squeezed it gently. Come, let me show you something. At Suyoken's insistence, Naruto found himself studying a curious plant placed in the center of the Ishino fields, fenced in and a good distance away from any other vegetation. He'd often wondered about it over the time they had been working, but no one ever made any move to tenter it, so he'd let it alone. It was, put simply, a nasty little thing. Its coloration was sickly green and brown mixed with dirty black. Wicked thorns thickly covered every inch of its stalk. Even its leaves were serrated, and stiff enough to actually cut. Naruto wouldn't have been surprised to discover it was as venomous as it looked. When he shared these observations with Suyoken, the older man nodded. You were right, on all counts. What's more, it is always growing creeper vines out in a fairly wide spread from itself. If any other plant tries to grow too close to it within 5 or 6 feet, the creepers will quickly catch it and strangle it to death. The blonde boy gasped and glanced around. If that's the case, why on earth do you have it right in the middle of all these plants? Suyoken gave him a secretive smile. Rather than answer, he knelt down and, pulling a small knife from his belt, dug into the dirt at his feet. After a short pause, he said, Come take a look. Naruto obeyed. Within the small hole, he saw white, feathery roots. There was a strange, almost artistic glint to their color, and they were covered with wispy hairs that penetrated a great deal of the surrounding soil. The roots seemed delicate, almost fragile, but Suyoken gave one strand a good tug to show that they were actually quite strong. These roots, the gentle farmer explained, come from that very same plant. They do much to enrich whatever soil they can reach, and they reach far, much farther than the creepers on the surface. Unlike the vines, the roots intertwine with other plants but do not harm them. Every new root system they encounter they bond with and use as an anchor to reach further. In this way, this one plant is doing more to help this entire farm than anything else. He looked Naruto squarely in the eye. So you see, sometimes you have to look beyond the surface to see something's true worth. To punctuate his point, he reached out and tapped Naruto lightly on the chest. Naruto felt his eyes moisten as he looked back at the man gratefully. Thank you, he said. Suyoken smiled and turned back to the roots, working at them with his knife. Maybe that simple truth is so obvious to us farmers because we have such a clear example. But you know, I'll bet this plant was held in contempt for a long time, and its stalk and creepers certainly deserved it. Eventually, though, people began to notice all the good things it did as well. All it took was time. He finished what he was doing and, setting aside his knife, handed a pair of segments of root to Naruto, who received them gingerly. At the boy's questioning look, Suyoken explained, if prepared properly, certain rare shoots of the root like those two can serve as a remedy for a vast range of illnesses, or a good salve for any number of things it can't cure. These bandages are lined with them, for example. You may use those in that manner, or simply keep them as a reminder, either way. Naruto threw a stunned glance at the roots in his hands, then quickly looked back at the older man and shook his head. Wait, if these are really that valuable, I can't accept them for free. But the elder Ishino refused to take them back. We all owe you and your father so much more, he said resolutely. Then he smiled. Just promise me you will continue to be a man he could be proud of. Naruto Uzumaki, proud ninja of the Leaf Village, regarded the simple, humble farmer Suyoken Ishino with profound respect. His face settled into firm lines. I will. He slipped the roots into his pouch with great care. Irido, Zano, and Choji, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. Well, the work is done, and Choji says you've got a lot to do yet today. Irido began with his characteristic smile, but you've got to be hungry from all that work. Would you boys care to join us for some eats? We'd be happy to have you. Zano was looking right at Naruto, trying not to look too eager or hopeful. Naruto looked at the other ninja, who regarded him evenly and silently, waiting for his response. Thank you, Irido, he said with a smirk, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline. He winced as his stomach picked right then to rumble in protest. Irido quirked an eyebrow at this, but he seemed more amused than confused. With a cheerful shrug, he said, okay, you must have your reasons. But listen, if you ever want a warm meal and good, plain folks to eat it with, look us up, all right. Zano, who had wilted disappointedly, suddenly perked up again. Hey, yeah, you could come back to visit. You will, won't you? The blonde ninja glanced between all three generations of Ishino farmers and smiled. Yeah, I think I will, he said quietly. On their way back to the center, Choji turned to his friend. They leave quite the impression, don't they? He asked with a smirk. Naruto just laughed. None of the subsequent requests the pair took the rest of the day took as much time as the first, but many seemed to last years longer, as Naruto was reminded that not everyone had made as much progress, looking beyond the surface. At the very next job, the woman welcomed Choji with a grateful smile and Naruto with a suspicious sneer. She would not let the blonde boy near her house. She said she didn't trust him not to steal or wreck anything, and the entire time they were painting her fence she was watching Naruto like a hawk, quick to point out the tiniest flaw in his work. Another woman slammed her door when she saw who was approaching and told the two the list of groceries she needed from the other side of what sounded like at least 3 locks and bolts. When they returned with the required items, they had to leave them on the doorstep. She would not come out until it was as far away from her home as possible. One man glared at Naruto with a simmering fury to melt steel. He turned him away entirely. Rather than accept the boy's help, he cancelled his request. Naruto gritted his teeth but did not snap back at them. Years ago, he would have told these people exactly what he thought of them, but now he said nothing, because he saw there was nothing he could say. He had 2 touchstones throughout the ordeal. One was Choji himself, the other boy remained quiet during their employer's abuses, and he was only ever polite when he spoke to them at all, but Naruto could tell it was forced at the worst times. A couple of instances he was surprised to see more anger in his friend's eyes than he felt himself. Whenever someone offered Choji something they denied Naruto, he would courteously but firmly refuse. The other touchstone was the roots in his pouch. Whenever someone was especially bitter or insulting, he would discreetly reach his hand in to brush his fingers against them. Eventually, though, people began to notice all the good things it did as well. He could hear the kind farmer's words in his head. All it took was time. This reminder, along with the knowledge that a friend was there to bear it with him, made all the maltreatment bearable. Which is not to say that the whole day was rotten. Indeed, for every person who looked down on Naruto, there were as many small victories to make up for them. To his surprise, there were a large number of people like the Ishinos, who actually liked him and appreciated all he'd done. Many of these actually went out of their way to apologize for the way they'd treated him in the past, and all of them told him he was welcome in their homes. There were at least as many of this kind of folk as there were their bitter opposites. What made the biggest difference to Naruto, however, were the people in the middle. Several of the people they met seemed to study the blonde boy with a mixture of puzzlement and curiosity. They seldom said much, only watched and wondered. Naruto could picture Suyoken saying they were just in the midst of seeing the improvement in the soil beneath their feet. As he and Choji were fixing the roof of an apartment, the woman who owned it was leaning casually against her balcony railing, spouting stories of all the terrible things she'd heard the fox had done on its rampage. Suddenly the railing gave way and she stumbled, but in a blur of motion Naruto caught her before she could fall. Calmly and gently, he asked her if she was all right. Stunned and flustered, she told him gruffly that she was, and ordered him back to work. But she was silent for the rest of the job, seeming to be lost in thought. She noticed but didn't say a word when, the roof being finished, Naruto went on to fix her railing. Just as they were about to leave, she offered a quiet thanks. Naruto had not been the easiest person to befriend. He was loud, obnoxious, hot-tempered and stubborn, and he made it very clear that he was not inclined to like anyone who didn't give him a reason to. That had put Choji off for a long time. He may have been lonely as a child, but he certainly didn't feel the inclination to approach the rude, defiant loudmouth. Then, on their first mission together, he'd finally discovered that Naruto didn't really need much of a reason at all. At that point, when he began to see Naruto as his friend, he remembered wondering if he'd been Naruto's friend for even longer than he knew. Regardless, it was an entirely new viewpoint for Choji. Yes, Naruto was fiery and hard-headed, but he was also fiercely loyal. He was always eager to help out, no matter the favor needed. Constantly on the lookout for the people he cared about, he was the first to stand up for a buddy even if he or she wouldn't stand up for themselves, and he didn't care who he had to defy doing it. Faults the rest of the world sneered down upon didn't matter at all to Naruto. He would never, ever give up on a friend. A bond made with the guy was a bond made for life, and Choji had come to appreciate it greatly. Still, eventually Choji had come to notice something strange. Aside from the 11 of them, one junior team, the Hokage and a handful of others, Naruto didn't really associate with much of anyone else. Being such an admirable person, Choji didn't understand why the guy remained so aloof from his own village. He also knew that, when they were younger, the general consensus among most of the kids he knew was to kick the blonde boy away, to leave him out and ignore him. This too he couldn't comprehend. Then he learned about the fox, and suddenly everything about Naruto made sense, why all manner of people mistreated him, why he could overlook any seemingly major flaw in his friends, why he often stood off to the side in the corner during social events. It didn't sit right with Choji. By that point, he'd been working at the center for a while, and he knew that public opinion about the blonde ninja had swung quite a ways from what Naruto clearly thought it still was. So when the plan for the trial by leaves had been presented to him, this idea came to mind almost instantly. Certainly, he knew there would be trying times for his friend, but Naruto had to know that the village was not quite as stacked against him as it had been once. That it meshed so well with the trait he admired most about the Hokage was likely no coincidence. Hinata had been just about to step through the door of a shop when she heard what she knew to be Naruto's voice. Curious, she put off her errand to go see what he was up to. She found him in a park around the corner with Choji, playing with a crowd of small children. She also spotted a man watching contentedly and nursing an ankle on a nearby bench and smiled. She'd heard what the two of them had been doing all day, and she had been very proud. She watched the happy scene for a long moment and took in the warmth it gave her. She wished that more of his days could pass like this. She saw him chase and tumble and laugh with the kids, and she giggled. She'd always known that he would be great with children. Without warning, that thought produced in Hinata a strange feeling she could not identify. It felt like desire. Some mysterious sort of yearning. Whatever it was, it set her heart to pounding and made her blush even more furiously than normal. Still a healthy shade of red, she hurried back to her errand. The sun was on its way down and Naruto was feeling good. He was pleased with all the good work he and Choji had been able to do for the villagers, and there hadn't been an unpleasant job for a while now. As he began to enjoy himself more and more, he'd begun to notice certain things. Like how the girl at the center who gave them their assignments, an old friend of Choji's, who'd been so frantic this morning and so grateful for their help, would let her hand linger on Choji's. Like how his hefty friend didn't seem to mind. Like Ino and Shikamaru arguing animatedly over something in a cafe and growing curiously silent as the two of them passed by. Like Hinata carrying a white bundle into a shop. That wouldn't have been odd, because he knew she said she was going to repair his coat, except that the shop she entered didn't have any of the supplies she'd need. He shrugged inwardly, plenty of mysteries for another time. Right now, he and Choji were on their way to what would be the last request of the day. The two of them had actually managed to clear off the entire posting board at the center. As he had before every job, Naruto felt a bit uneasy about how these people would receive him, but he shook it off. Whatever happened would happen. Choji gave their work one last inspection, then turned to his friend and said cheerfully, "Okay, that about does it." Naruto smiled and jogged over to the old couple. "We're finished," he announced. "Come take a look." The elderly woman got up without a word and went with him around the corner of their house. The old man reached for his cane and followed along a short ways behind. A portion of the kitchen wall had been knocked in by a falling tree branch. Choji pointed out the repairs they had made and described how they disposed of the waste wood. Then Naruto took pride in telling the woman that they'd even managed to fix the stove that had taken a great deal of the impact. The woman regarded their work silently, no emotion playing across her face. She did not move for so long that Naruto began to worry. "Mom," he prompted. She turned to look at him and her eyes hardened. "Do not expect a thank you," she said suddenly. "You can't even begin to cover the debt that thing has incurred for you." She reached out and jabbed his stomach sharply with a wrinkled finger. To Naruto, it felt like a massive punch, knocking the wind out of him. His expression tightened and he gritted out resolutely, "If there's anything more I can do for you. Can you bring my son back?" She cried frantically, clutching his jacket with white-knuckled hands. "Can you bring that precious boy back to his mother who misses him so? Can you return his smiling face to me?" The acute pain and sorrow and anguish in her voice found echoes in Naruto's own heart, and he shuddered as he was reminded that these people too knew what tragedy was. He shook his head sadly. "No," he whispered. "No, I'm afraid I can't." The woman stared up into his face for a long moment. Then her hands dropped away and her expression once again turned emotionless. "Then you can do nothing," she said tiredly as she turned away and walked off toward her door. Naruto felt like he'd been slapped. "Mom," he called quickly after her. She paused but did not turn. His features hardened. "I'm sorry for your loss, believe me I am. I'm sorry my father couldn't kill the fox. I don't know why he couldn't, why he had to seal it. But I do know that if he hadn't, more lives would have been lost, and that's enough for me. I don't know why he had to choose me, why I had to be the vessel, but I'm glad he did. I can't say that I've led a charmed life because of it, but I'd never wish my fate on anyone else." He drew himself up proudly. "I can't change the past, but I can choose the path I take into the future. I can't bring back the S or undo past tragedy, but I can and I will use my life to protect you and the entire village, now. That is my solemn word, my Nendo, my ninja way." The old woman waited until she was sure he was done speaking, and then disappeared into her house without a word. Naruto let out a deflated sigh. Choji was mercifully silent. They turned to go. Wait a moment, please." The elderly man, who had watched the entire thing from the corner of the building, limped forward hastily. Upon reaching him, he reached a hand up and touched Naruto's face, studying the blonde boy with an awed expression. After a moment, he seemed to come back to himself. He withdrew his hand and his eyes watered and dropped away. "Forgive an old man's foolishness," he said hoarsely. "For a moment there, it was as if my son himself was standing there." He glanced back up at a surprised Naruto. "I see it now. I see it, and I don't know how I missed it for so long. You have the same eyes. You have the same heart that he had." He looked at the repaired section of wall, then back again. "My wife misses our boy greatly, he was very dear to her. I miss him too, but hearing your words, and seeing his reflection in you like this, I feel I remember him a bit better." A single tear streamed down his weathered face. "Please, if you would forgive the selfishness, could I ask you to visit a sad old man and his wife again?" Naruto felt his own eyes moisten, and he nodded solemnly. The old man held his gaze for a long moment with a look of gratitude, and then turned and walked slowly away. Slowly, but a little straighter, with a little less limp. Choji was mercifully silent. Some time later, the two of them had returned to the center and reported the job completed. Naruto was once again in high spirits. "All right," he yelled, pumping his fist to the twilight sky and wearing his famous grin. "That's it. Trial passed now, right? Time to go get some ramen." Choji caught his shoulder before he could run off. "Not quite yet," he said apologetically. He held up a small slip of paper. "It seems there was a last-minute posting." Naruto was dismayed. "Fart," he whined. "What can there possibly be left to do tonight?" He gestured up at the setting sun and the surrounding village. "All the shops are closing now and there won't be enough light to see anything." The hefty ninja examined the paper. "This job doesn't seem to require any of that." Naruto heaved a sigh of defeat. Okay, where is it?" "The Hokage's tower." "What?" Naruto looked too drained to be stunned. "You've got to be kidding me," he said blandly. They had arrived at the tower, or more specifically, its roof. Choji shook his head and read the request again. "I need someone to sit on top of the flagpole at the Hokage's office overnight. That's all." Naruto was silent for all of one moment more. Then he exploded. "Who needed that?" Choji raised his chin a little. "I did," he said bluntly. His friend gaped for a second. "Why?" The hefty ninja crossed his arms. "I told you this would be a true test of endurance. The Hokage have frequently had to work under very trying conditions. You haven't eaten for almost 2 days now, and you must be at least a bit drained from all the hard work today. It will be tricky work staying up there, awake and hungry." But if you can manage it, you will have proved beyond a doubt that you pass. Naruto still looked unhappy about it, but nonetheless he nodded and began to climb the pole. Choji smirked and called after him, "Remember, you're done tomorrow at dawn. I'll come get you then." It was miserable. That was it. That was the only word Naruto could think of to describe his current situation, miserable. For the fifth time in as many minutes, he began to nod off, nearly slipping off his perch. For the fifth time, he jerked back awake just before losing his balance, once again shifting his weight just enough for a new spot on his behind to get sore and for the old spot to begin to ache. But hey, at least that got his mind off his now perpetually growling stomach for 1 second. During the day, he'd been so busy that he'd been able to put aside his hunger, for the most part, except when someone offered him something to eat. Now, however, when there was nothing to do except suffer, it seemed that his stomach no longer felt any inclination to let itself be ignored. A chilling breeze blew past, and Naruto shivered and nodded to himself. And of course nature would pick tonight the one night he didn't have his coat to be a cold night. So, in short, there he sat, balancing his already sore backside on the hard, round, metal tip of the flagpole, fighting off fatigue, starvation, extreme boredom, and the elements at the same time. Yup, this was definitely his new definition for miserable conditions. He had no idea how long he'd been there, and he had even less of a clue how much longer it would be. All he knew was that dawn could not come soon enough. Yet again, he wondered why in the world Choji was putting him through this. What did sitting on a flagpole have to do with being Hokage? He knew the old lady would never. He began to nod off again, but this time his waking jerk occurred simultaneously with a blast of wind against his face, and the combination was enough to pitch him over backwards. He let out a yelp, but was just able to catch himself by using chakra to fasten the soles of his feet to the ball he'd been sitting on. The maneuver left him hanging upside down by his feet, but kept him from falling to the ground below, so he breathed a sigh in relief. When he opened his eyes, he saw a large, dark shape in front of him and realized that he was looking at Hokage Mountain, and that gave him pause. He flipped back upright and turned himself around to face it properly. He could just make out in the darkness the features of the 5 Hokage. Even in the cold dark of night they stared out over the village, as if keeping silent vigil for the people asleep there. And he knew they were merely stone faces, but the thought made him think for a moment. He turned round again and looked at the twinkling night lights of the streets and buildings of his home. What if the village went to war while he was Hokage? What if attackers came in the night? He'd post guards, certainly, but would he be willing to stay up himself? As Hokage, you will go through stressful times, occasions when you will be pressed beyond the norm. There may come times when you have to go a week without sleep, 2 without a decent meal. I even heard the third once went an entire month without either. Could Naruto do that? Would he be willing to push himself that hard if the need came? The answer, in Naruto's mind, was a resounding yes, without hesitation. Why? Why would he put himself through such an ordeal? The twinkling lights before him told him the answer. It's not about me. He laughed to himself quietly as his gaze wandered from Sakura's house to the Anbu barracks to the Ishino farm, across the many apartments and homes and clan houses, and finally to the Hyuga compound. It's about all of them. He made silent note to thank Choji for this reminder. Setting himself, Naruto said softly to no one in particular, "Sleep soundly, Leaf Village. Let me be your watcher tonight." When Choji arrived in the morning, he was surprised. Naruto sat perfectly still and wide awake on the pole, silently watching the sunrise with a content look of peace on his face. Oh, he'd known his friend would make it, all right, but even he was surprised how easily the other boys seemed to taking it. It just made him all the more certain the guy was right for the job. "Hey, Naruto," he called. The blonde ninja glanced back down at him and smiled easily. "Morning, Choji. You're done. You pass. Come on down, and we'll get some breakfast, my treat." Naruto leaped down and landed neatly. Straightening, he grinned at his hefty friend. "You're on." He took one step, and fell flat on his face, snoring before he hit the ground. Choji just chuckled, heaved Naruto up, slung his arms over his shoulders, and took his buddy to get some well-deserved sleep. Hours later, a better rested Naruto was just getting ready to take Choji up on his offer to do lunch instead when there was a soft knock at his door. He wasn't surprised to see who had come to visit him. Hey, Hinata. He greeted the raven-haired girl cheerfully. Hi, Naruto, she greeted back with a shy smile. Are you feeling better? Naruto laughed. Sure am. As soon as I get some food in me'll be good as new. He said with a grin, flexing one arm. Then he looked at her hopefully. Hey, you wanna come? She brightened and nodded once eagerly. Then she seemed to remember something. Oh, you here, I finished your coat. She handed him the garment she'd been holding at her side, neatly folded and laundered. He accepted it eagerly and let it fall open. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. What had been the morning before a dingy, ragged, tattered mess was now clean new fabric. He couldn't even tell there had been any holes or SS. He would have sworn it was an entirely different coat, except that it still bore his own scent, faint, but detectable. He gave it another admiring once over, then looked back at its mender. It's just like new. Thanks, Hinata, he exclaimed gratefully. She glanced down and bit her lip for a moment before continuing. Actually, there's something more. She glanced up at him meekly. You please, try running some chakra through it. Curious, he stared back at the coat for a moment before obeying, sending some chakra to slide down its length. For a long stretch, nothing happened. When it got to the bottom, however. Whoa, he breathed. The flames rendered on the coat came alive, swirling and dancing in a blaze of color that was mystifying. IIW wove some chakra-s sensitive threads that produce genjutsu through the fabric. I hope you don't mind. Are you kidding? He turned another look of admiration on her. It's amazing. You're amazing, Hinata. She blushed deeply and fidgeted awkwardly, but her smile made it clear she was pleased. That was when Naruto noticed something else, something hanging around her He frowned and tilted his head to one side. Hey, Hinata, what's that? She saw where he was looking and blushed even deeper. Rather than say anything, she hesitantly held the pendant, for that's what it was up for his inspection. He leaned forward to peer at it. The main piece was a crimson-painted metal duplication of the spiral symbol Naruto always wore. Around it was placed a still, golden flame, and mounted in its center was a small azure gemstone with a shining swirl of color in its heart, a clear imitation of the Rasengan. For a long moment, Naruto stared at it with an awed expression. Then he glanced up at its maker. So, what's it for? He asked with a smirk, his heart pounding. Hinata set it back to rest against her chest and he straightened. She stared down at her feet for a long moment, and then, mustering her courage, looked him in the eye and said, to remind me of a person precious to me. She stepped closer and hesitated for an instant, but before she could change her mind gave him a hasty kiss on the cheek, of course. She was bright red when she pulled back, and she noticed he was not far behind. Without another word, she coyly spun on her foot and strolled away, heart fluttering as if she was soaring through the clouds. Back in his doorway, Naruto was breathless for all of a moment or two. Then he shook himself out of his daze, laughed, and followed her, whipping his coat on as he went. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.